Hello, and welcome to another iClone 7 Academy tutorial. Today's topic will be getting started with the long-awaited curve editor. That's right, the curve editor is here. In today's tutorial, we will learn how to animate a ball and tweak the animation using the curve editor by moving curves, applying presets to keys, and by changing the bounce duration. So let's get started. Let's go ahead and select the sphere or the beach ball, whatever you want to call it. And as you can see here right now, it's placed at the origin of the world, and our pivoting point right now is right at the bottom of the sphere. This is kind of important. So it's not in the center of the sphere, it's at the bottom. Alright, so right now, since we're starting to work with it, we're going to start working with the curve editor. It's important that you start using our workspaces a little bit more. The reason why I'm saying this is because there's a minimum distance for the curve editor that after a certain point you cannot shrink it anymore. So beyond this point, as you can see, I cannot move it. I can move it the other way, but I can't move it this way. So in order to keep the real estate and have the curve editor on, it is best if you just go between your workspace on your standard and you go between the workspace and your animation by going Control 2 or Control 3 for the animation. Control 2 is default, Control 3 is for animation. It's a very important workflow for you to pick up. Now, let's go ahead and make this ball animated. So let's go in time. First, we're going to set this key on Z, which is up. And let's set this to 300, so we'll move up. Now we're going to go to about half the animation, which is about frame 30. And we'll go ahead and set it to 0. And then we'll go to the end of the animation and we'll type again 300. So we'll go right back up. Now let's play this animation. It's animated. It looks okay, but the bounce doesn't look very realistic. This is because it has a smooth transition between keys. So as you can see here, not very good. I mean, sure, it's animated, but it doesn't look very realistic. This is because we're doing the animation manually, so physics is not kicking in. You have to simulate the physics. However, let's go ahead and bring the curve editor and see why this is happening. There's several ways you can bring the curve editor. One, you can go to plugins and go to curve editor and select curve editor or edit curve. Next, you can right click on the sphere and go to curve editor plugin, and then you go object transforms. And the other option is you could go to the transfer track inside the timeline, and you can right click anywhere inside that track and go curve editor and go edit curve. Now this will pop up this editor right here. Now you will notice that we have here our X, Y, and Z position. X is in red, Y is in green, and Z is in blue. However, we don't see the X position here because it's right under our Y, which is green. However, you can single out each of the X, Y, and Z positions by clicking here on what is called the tree view, as you can see right here. Now this will bring, if you select click individually, or you can control click and keep adding the different curves. Now what you're seeing here at the vertical line here is the value of that, whatever the position is. So if we want to move, for example, right now it's at 300 here in Z. So if we want to move this, for example, down, I can go ahead and move this down to a different value. As you can see, it moves it up and down. Now the horizontal line here is equal to time. Now notice that our timeline and our curve editor are synchronized. So if we scrub one, the other one gets affected as well, no matter where we go. So over here, like so, I can click anywhere on the timeline to go to a particular key. The same thing, I can do it in here as well. Click anywhere in the timeline. Now, in the curve viewer right here, if you click once, it's not going to work. But if you double click somewhere in an empty space in the viewer, in the curve editor, then it will snap to that particular frame. So just so you know. The tree view is for displaying the curves, and inside the viewer here, for the curves, this is where you actually select things. So I can do this several ways. I can click on the curve and it will select all the keys for that particular curve. I can click, drag, select, and that will select the curve as well. Now you can do it on a single curve, or you can have it on multiple curves. Notice here that I just deselected everything, and I'm going to select the Z again. Notice how this became colored. This tells you what you have selected. So if you're not sure if you have something selected or not, this is a good way to find out. Now if I click drag here, you will notice I have the X and the Y selected now. This is because one is on top of the other. Now let's say that I want to have the sphere in at a different X position. So that means from side to side. So I want to go in the positive, which means we're going to move to the right. So what I'm going to do here is, now since I have it the X curve isolated, I'm going to go ahead and press my Shift key and move it upwards. And this will translate all the keys on that curve to a different position. Now, if you want to be super accurate, right now, look, you can go all the way to 3 decimals. But if you actually just want to type a value, you can totally type a value in here and say 100, for example, and that will give you 100 even. And that's for all the keys in X. If you had to do this in the timeline, you would have to go one by one of these keys and change the value yourself one by one by going into the modify panel and moving those and changing the values in here. That would be very, very tedious work. Now with the curve editor, you can do them all at once, which is very, very cool. Now let's do the same thing with the Y. I'm going to go ahead and drag select the curve so all the keys are selected, and let's go maybe, I don't know, let's go 50 in Y. Okay, which is basically pushing backwards a little bit. So now when I select all my curves by clicking on position, now there are a little bit of offset, so now we can see all the curves at once. Just to let you know, we didn't have to move the X and the Y curves at all. This is just for demonstration purpose and to show you that we can actually do this. Now, if you're just moving things in one particular axis, that's all you have to do. Just you don't even have to, you know, move these things, and you could have left them at 0 already, and it doesn't matter if they're one on top of the other, it will not affect your animation at all. I just wanted to make sure you guys saw this so that when we do some steps on the next few minutes, you'll be able to see clearly how these keyframes move around. Okay, now so basically, if you need to also select keys, you can just select, click, drag, select with a marquee. You can do one key, multiple keys. Again, if you have the key selected, notice that right now I went over the keys only, not the curves, and so I only have those selected. So I can click, drag, and select all these middle keys right now. And again, if you're only working with just one curve, you can always isolate that curve and just work with that one particular curve. So this is very handy, especially when you're starting to do different kinds of tangents and transitions and so forth. We will talk about that later. Now that you know how to select keys and curves inside the curve editor, and how to isolate them as you need them, let's go ahead and start animating the timing of that bouncing ball so that it looks a little bit more realistic. Because basically what we need to simulate here is gravity. So let's go ahead and bring in this diagram so we know so you can see what I'm talking about here. Now you will notice that as the ball goes down, it will start to accelerate. This is because gravity is pulling towards Earth, right? Towards the center of the Earth. And you'll notice once it bounces and goes up, it will start to decelerate because gravity is going against the force that is going upwards. So let's go ahead and mimic this with the bouncing ball. Actually, it's quite simple. Now what we're going to do here is we know that as we go down here, the sphere, as we go down, so let's go ahead and pick this last keyframe here, this key right there, and we're going to go ahead and tell it to do an acceleration by simply doing this. Now look what happens. Looks a little bit better, right? Okay, so we also know that when we go up, it will decelerate. So this time I'm going to select these two keys up here, and I'm going to tell it to do a deceleration. And let's play that. That looks much better. Okay, so with a simple control of our curve tensions, we were able to simulate a much more realistic bounce now. But wait, that's not all. There is more. You can now use apply transition to keyframes. I want you to take a good look here at this particular middle keyframe, and notice that it's solid right now. Now I'm going to select this keyframe, and I'm going to right click. I'm going to go to curve, transition curve presets. Now this brings up a whole bunch of presets that will allow you to make your life a lot simpler. One thing to understand is this: when you select the key and you apply a transition tension, when you apply a particular curve tension, it does it on both sides of the key. But when you apply a transition, it will apply it to the left of the key only. So right now I have the middle one selected, and I'm going to go tell it to do acceleration. Okay, so, and now we're going to go to the last key here. As it goes up, the ball goes up, and we're going to tell it to do a transition decelerate. So as you can see here, it makes things a lot smoother and a lot more realistic as well. Now this makes your workflow a lot faster. Also notice here that my key is hollow. This means that it has a transition applied to it. So that's kind of important. So that's how you know that something is happening on the key itself. So this is how you know when you have a transition applied to it. Now, one thing about transition, and which is very cool here, is that you can control the strength of those transitions. So let's keep on playing the bounce animation, and we're going to adjust the strength of that transition. Notice that if I move towards the right, we are increasing, or in essence, applying more tension to the curve. So as it goes down very fast, and then it slows down and stops. So here slows, fast down, slow, fast down. Now if we go the other way, it will start taking a more linear approach, which is basically continually going downwards without any acceleration or deceleration to the curve. So basically you're controlling the tension of that transition by using the strength slider. You can do the same thing over here by selecting our last keyframe over here. I just moved it slightly by mistake, so let's go ahead and make sure it's at 300, and let's go ahead and play with the tension. Notice here I'm doing here while I'm playing the animation, which is very, very cool, being able to see the curve tension move and see what's happening, what's going on while you're playing the animation is a major time saver, and it really allows you to really fine-tune that animation just the way you want it. So it's heaven sent. This curve editor, it was a long time due. So great. So let's say you like what's going on, and it's like, okay, well, this is great, but you know what? I really don't want those transitions. I want to be able to move those curves manually and play with the tension of those curves manually. So what do? Now you can always right-click in the middle, in an empty space over here, and say select all keys, and then you can right-click again, and you go to curves and set to default. and this will remove all the transitions from the keys that you added to, and then you're left just with the different curve tensions. Now, this little things are called handles, and this is what controls the tension. You can turn the handles on and off by clicking here, like so. And you can change the tension of the curve by selecting the actual curve handle. And now if you press the shift before you click and you move, notice right now since we have those two keyframes selected, it's moving the tension of all those curves. So let's go ahead and undo that. We don't want that. We actually want to deal with just the tension, the handle for this particular one. So I'm going to go shift, move, and notice how I'm controlling the tension of the animation by doing that. So I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing here. And you can see in real time how this is affecting the animation. So you can totally control the tension of the curve. Now, one thing to notice here is that if you would like to change the tension, let's go ahead and stop this and select this key. Now, if I try to move the handle in here, you will see a snap. Look at this, boom, it snapped. This is because it went from that V shape to this flat shape. This is because right now our handles are unified. In order to be able to move handles individually, you need to break those handles. And to do that, you just use this icon over here. It's called break. Notice when you break it, it gives you this little dotted line, which means like it has a little break into those lines. So that's kind of a nice visual cue that's telling you, okay, now you can move the handles separately. So now I can go ahead and just move the curve, this curve over here, like so, like that, and see what that gives us. See? So full control here of that animation curve, which allows you to tweak that animation exactly the way you want it. And each one is individual, so I can move the curve tension over here so that each one will have individual bounces. Okay, so next we're going to talk about keyframes and changing the timing of the keyframe as a whole. Now, if you move the keyframes in here, in the timeline, it will move all the keyframes that are in that particular time in the timeline. By that I mean, look at this. Notice that all the keyframes here are getting moved at once. And however, if you want to tweak just one particular the motion in one particular axis, you can do that. However, what's going to happen is you will find out that when you move this, and I'm going to press the shift key and move to the side because this will lock it in value, or just moving it in time doing it this way. So notice that as soon as I let go, all of a sudden you end up with more keyframes, because you're not moving all of the keyframes that are related to the object. You're only moving keyframes that are related to the position on that axis. So in order for you to be able to move all of them at once, you have to make sure that they are all lined up, and you have to do it in the timeline. But if you want to do a specific move on a particular axis, you can go ahead and do it here in the curve editor. Otherwise, you would have to go, to change that in different areas. You would have to do it inside here in the modify parameter. Having them all at once in the curve editor is heaven sent. It makes things a lot easier. So now if we play this animation, you will notice that it will go down faster than it goes up. So, and now we can go ahead and just select the key over here, and we can move this particular key, and just play it, see what happens. Boom. So as it goes down faster, and then as it goes up, it goes a lot slower. Okay, so this will conclude this quick intro to the curve editor. We have lots more to cover, but that will be in another tutorial. So I hope you enjoyed, and I will catch you on the next one. Until then, take care and good night.